Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. It's a Stashing with Stephanie day, and that's where we come up with a brand new fat quarter friendly pattern that's been inspired by this month's fabric collection that we send to our members. This month we're making Celestial. It is a 60-degree diamond pattern, and it is mostly strip piece, which makes it go together pretty quickly. I'm going to show you all the tips and tricks for cutting and then also making sure everything is aligned perfectly so you can be really proud of your points in today's video tutorial. And I absolutely love how this turned out, and from the sneak peeks I've been showing on my TikTok, you guys have been enjoying it too. Part of what makes it look really cool is obviously the fabric, which we're going to take a peek at in just a second. It is Zen by Sue Zipkin for Clothworks Fabrics. But instead of doing it scrappy and just kind of having the diamonds end up anywhere, I was very deliberate with my color placement, and I made every block so that the color was in the same spot and that fabric was in the same spot in every block. And it really helped create kind of this radiating star look. So by all means, you can absolutely make it scrappy, but if you want it to have the same look as mine, you're gonna wanna make sure that you're placing everything in the same spot for each block, and we'll go over how to do that. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of how to make this pattern, we're going to talk a little bit about Stashing with Stephanie. Stashing with Stephanie is a subscription club that we came up here with Quilt Addicts Anonymous many, many years ago when we were a struggling brick and mortar quilt shop. We thought, at the time we could barely afford to bring in one fabric collection a month, which is not a lot of fabric. But we thought, well, maybe we can get some people to commit to getting one bundle of fabric a month. And we came up with it, and it was going okay. And then my husband goes, do you think you could design a pattern each month to go with it? And I was like, hold my beer. So dozens and dozens of fat quarter patterns later, including 2 books, Fat Quarter Patchwork Quilts and Fat Quarter Workshop, here we are. We have so many patterns that are available for you guys to inspire you. And what we've created is this club, and it's super fun. We've got a Facebook group where people can interact and share what they're doing with the fabric. And it's just a really fun one to be a part of. And it's a great way to be able to quilt when you are on a budget because it comes with discounts. So when you join, you get 10 fat quarters for $32.49 plus shipping. That is about a $40 value. So already you're saving off just to start by getting your bundle. And this is not tired old fabric. This is brand new, just released fabric from modern designers within the quilting industry. Then when you join for the first time, you get a coupon code to get 12 patterns of your choice, any fat quarter pattern that's been a part of the club. And you can get that right away. That is a $144 value that you get for free when you join. And then every month after that, we give you a coupon code to get 2 more fat quarter patterns that are part of our Stashing with Stephanie Club. So you can get the latest month's pattern that we designed to go with the bundle you just got, plus another one of your choice. And once you've been a member for 6 months, then you get access to every single Stashing with Stephanie patterns because we like to reward those who stay on for a little while. Now, you also, that's not where the discounts end, you get 20% off any additional fabric that you purchase. So for example, 10 fat quarters usually is not enough to make an entire quilt top. This one uses 15 plus some binding fabric and background fabric. And so we make what's called a finishing kit, which includes the 5 fat quarters you didn't receive, and then your background and binding, and you can add that to your bundle to be able to turn it in your bundle into a full quilt kit. You don't have to get that, but it is available for you every month, and you save 20% on that, plus any other fabric from the line that you'd like. Say you've got another project in mind, or you want to get enough to do some borders or backing fabric, you can save on that while supplies last. And you get one more discount. You get 30% off my 2 fat quarter friendly books, so you can be inspired even more. So it's a great way to use up that stash because you can get access to all the patterns to inspire you and make something gorgeous, and a great way to add to your collection and be able to continue to quilt for less than the quilt store prices, because we all know prices have gone up, but we know that you still want to be able to enjoy your hobby, so this helps make that possible. So That said, if you really like this video and you get super excited about making this quilt, we've already shipped out this fabric to our members. So if you need this quilt in your life, what you're going to want to do is go join, so that way you will get the bundle that ships in May. And that one is absolutely gorgeous. I'm so excited to work with that one. I'm a sucker for owls, so I think it's called Mystic Moon, and it is so, so pretty. I'm so excited to work with it. It's very like moody design. But that's going to be your first bundle. You won't get this. But once you've signed up, then you're going to get access to all those discounts. So you can go get a quilt kit while supplies last. You can go get additional fabric and you'll get that 20% discount. Plus you can add on this pattern, Celestial, as one of your free 12 patterns to get you started with. So that can keep you busy while you wait for your first bundle to arrive next month. All right, let's take a quick peek at the fabric that is included this month and some that isn't, and then we'll get on with the tutorial. Also, just a quick plug, if you really are not a fan of sitting here and listening to me talk about Stash with Stephanie all the time, or looking at the fabric and you just want to get to the tutorial, we are very soon going to be launching a website that is essentially the commercial-free version of that. So you're going to be able to watch just the meat and potatoes of the tutorial, but you are going to have to pay for the course. But everything will be really easily searched, and you're going to be able to find the tutorial to go with the pattern that you have, get special discounts on the patterns, and lots of really great things. But that's a way to get around it because, you know, girls got to eat. So we got to promote the fabric. We got to promote, have some YouTube ads on over here. But if you don't want to have that, you're going to have an option very soon, but it's going to be, you're going to have to pay for the course, and it'll be pretty reasonable. We've priced ours pretty competitively, we think, but something is coming for that. All right, so this is Zen by Sue Zipkin for Clothworks Fabrics. It is a really, really gorgeous line, and it had more in it than we were going to use in our bundles because we always include 15 fabrics in our bundles that are going out to our subscription club. So we have a couple that we didn't include but are available for you guys to purchase separately. One of them is this gorgeous panel, and we have all the kind of life that we see within the collection. We've got some hummingbirds, we have some turtles, there's some dragonflies, kind of a tree of life there. We have a nice dove, another butterfly, more butterflies, and what kind of looks like a mandala over the sunset. My daughter actually designed a quilt that we called Unicorn Love that used a panel like this as kind of like the alternating blocks, where all you had to do was fussy cut out the block and then you could use fabric big in other locations. This is sized correctly to where you absolutely could get that pattern, and then you'll be able to use fat quarters to fill in the other pieces and kind of make that work. It really is gorgeous, it's fun, and that would absolutely work with this as well. Next up, we have this really beautiful, calming watercolor-esque print where it has a lot of the blue-greens that we see throughout the collection, but also a little bit of kind of peachy yellow. And it is really gorgeous. It's really fun, but I didn't include it in the bundle because it's very light value, and I wanted it to be able to stand out against the background fabric, and I didn't think this would do a great job of doing that. This one is also not included in the bundle because I thought we had a bunch of other really brightly colored ones and that read more hot. So we kept this one out, but again, we do have it available as fat quarters and on yardage and in bundles for the full collection, not the bundles that went out to our subscribers. This print also is not included in the bundles. I think it's absolutely lovely and gorgeous. It reminds me of a lot of water and watercolor all mixing together. Again, I didn't include it because the color value is too close to the background. This fabric here is not included in the bundle we sent to subscribers either, but it is the background that we're using for the quilt. So if you get a finishing kit, this will be included in it. It's absolutely gorgeous. I know a lot of times we go with solids because it helps keep the price of the finishing kit and the full kits down, but this one was just too beautiful to pass up. And so we are using this as our background for our quilt, and it just looks absolutely gorgeous. All right, if you are a Stash with Stephanie subscriber, all the next fabrics are ones that were included in the bundles that we sent out. You've got 10 of the 15 that I'm about to show you, but again, you can always get the others on yardage, on fat quarters, if you just want to get the panel so you can have that, maybe put it on the quilt back or something. Lots of options there if you want to make sure you have the complete full collection and not just the finishing kit that we made to go along with it, but it's all really pretty. This one is really gorgeous. It's very orange and it has kind of these stamped flowers on it with a mottled orange background. It really kind of reads as a blender from a distance and is a very pretty color. This one is more of a peachy orange and it has what looks like a starfish kind of in the background. It's really, really pretty and I love this coloring and it looks great in the block. We're starting to get some of the florals in here, and this one again reads more hot. It's got the red or the yellow and the orange in here, but also we're starting to get some of the pinks and also some lime. So it is really pretty, and now we're going to transition into the cooler colors. Aside from the background, this is probably the lightest print in terms of color value that we have, but it really stands out very well because of the deeper blues that run through this. Now, because we're going to be working with some tiny smaller diamonds, it kind of depends on where it ends up getting cut for the strip piece unit, but it looks gorgeous no matter where it ends up. This one kind of looks like a bubbled snake print type-esque design where it is a really subtle pattern on it and some variation in color, but it really kind of reads as a solid-ish blender from a distance. It looks really pretty in the block. This one is one of my favorite prints. It is a mandala and all different types of them all intermixed together. The repeat is very clever on this one. And I love the mix of the cooling tones of the teal and the blue and purple. It's really, really pretty. Here's that kind of bubble snake print again, this time in more of a teal green. It's really gorgeous. I place it next to this one and some in the block, and sometimes it's kind of hard to tell depending on where it's cut, what's what fabric, but it looks really gorgeous nevertheless. We're going to see this print twice in the collection, and this is the first time, obviously. It has these really gorgeous hummingbirds on it. They really stand out with those limey green and fuchsia and a little bit of purple against that tealy blue background. It is gorgeous. It's so fun. And I didn't fussy cut a single one of these. I just strip pieced everything. I didn't plan where my strips were going to go. I just kind of cut across. And I had several of these little hummingbirds end up looking like I perfectly fussy cut them into my diamond. So they're a great size for the size of the smaller diamond that we're going to be working with today. All right, here we have more florals, and this reads very blue indigo as like a very good color combination. It reads very deep. It's pretty. This is one that I kind of put towards the tip of my diamond with that color change, and it just looks gorgeous to kind of like culminate at this. Here's the second variation of our hummingbirds, and this time it's against a very deep kind of royal blue mottled background, and it's so pretty. Those hummingbirds, they almost look like it's a really similar coloring to the first one, but they really pop with those lime greens against a deeper blue. It looks gorgeous. I use this in the very tip of my diamonds. We have one more of those sort of flower print as well, and this one is very fuchsia pink, and it's really gorgeous, but it is just a little bit lighter color value than the rest of the pinks that I'm about to show you, pinks and purples. And so this one I did use as the smaller diamonds, and then everything else I used as my larger diamonds because they're a little bit darker in that value and they stand out a little bit more. This one is really pretty. We've seen it before, but in this colorway, you really can see that the background kind of looks like dragonfly wings with like a crackle going everywhere. It's really gorgeous, and I use these big in the diamonds. This one is also really gorgeous. It is that watercolor drips that we've seen before, but it just looks so pretty with this really deep fuchsia with hints of the green and the turquoise and the purple. It's absolutely gorgeous. Here's that little dot snakeskin again, this time in a very deep indigo with a little bit of blue here and there. It's really pretty. And I have saved the best for last. This is my favorite print of the entire collection. It's that mandala that we looked at a little bit earlier, but this one is in such a deep purple. It's so gorgeous, and the coordinating colors in the mandalas are just absolutely gorgeous. Looks beautiful, is really a showstopper as one of the large diamonds in our block. All right, so this is Zen by Sue Zipkin for Clothworks Fabrics. We have lots of options for you. You can get a quilt kit that includes everything that I used in my pattern for Celestial. It's missing a few of the fat quarters and the panel. If you want, you also can get a full fat quarter bundle that includes everything in it, plus your panel. And you also can just, if say you're a member and you want a finishing kit, but you really want everything that's in the line because you love it so much, we do have a la carte fat quarters and panels that you can purchase, so that way you can just have one of everything and you can mix and match and maybe have a little bit left over at the end. So the first thing we're going to do is cover our cutting instructions. So I'm not going to go over any measurements because you can get that in the pattern Celestial. You can get it on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. But I am going to go over how to cut for the 60-degree diamonds and triangles because it's a little different than your normal 45-degree angles, and I want to make sure you do it right. The first thing you need to know is which 60-degree ruler to come up with. Now, there are a couple of different ones on the market, but the main difference is you need to know that you have points on all three sides. If you have one where the top tip is blunt, so basically the top quarter inch of that triangle is missing, then the math is going to be really different and your pieces are not going to fit together for this pattern. So that's the biggest thing. I use the Clearview Triangle ruler. I have the 8-inch. We sell that on our website. And for 95% of my patterns, that is perfectly fine. We do a lot of 60-degree angle stuff. I'm also going to show you how to cut it with a regular 6x24-inch ruler today that has markings for 30 and 60 degree on it, because some of our background pieces are larger than 8 inches for this one because we're making a pretty big block. But the vast majority of the time, whenever I'm doing a 60 or 30 degree anything, this is perfect for what I need. They do make them a little bit bigger than this though, but most of the time you don't need it, and there are workarounds on the rare occasions that you do. So now we're going to get over how to cut with this. So when you're following along, you'll notice that I've said that you need to select a certain amount of fat quarters, and then we're going to cut all of that fat quarter. Here is a row that I have partially sewn together. I'm waiting on some pieces that I'm about to cut here in order to be able to finish it. But you'll notice that while my center large diamonds change, all of my other small diamonds stay in the same place. So this bright orange is in the same place in each block. The background is in the same place in each block. The lighter orange is in the same place in each block. And what it does is it starts with kind of our lighter or our background and then our hotter colors. And then we're moving into our cooler colors, but also getting deeper in value as we go out. And it creates a really stunning look. I've gotten a lot of comments on TikTok as I've been sharing my progress while I'm working on this behind the scenes, and people are loving the colors. And I think it would still look super cool if it was scrappy and all mixed up. But if you really like the way this looks because of that color change and how it's always working its way out, then you're going to want to pay attention and make sure that you are always cutting them the same way, so that way and placing them in the same spot so you too can create this look. So let me show you how that works here. All right, so we are going to be selecting 42 strips. That's going to be 6 strips from 7 fabrics. And we want everything that's going to go in our bottom row and in our top row. This is your background, so that's cut at a separate step. But we want to get our 3 fat quarters that are going to also be here, and our 4 fat quarters that are going to make up our top row. And we want to make sure we cut them all to the same angle that is shown in your pattern for step 2. Now it tells you to angle this at a really specific direction. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my selvage and I'm going to put it on the end because I don't want to use that, so I'm going to cut that off. Now I'm going to angle my ruler so that the inch line that I'm measuring to is even with the top and the point is even with the bottom, and I'm just going to slice off this corner. In some patterns you need to keep that, and this one we don't, so I'm just going to toss it when I'm done. Another way you can do this that's a little bit more ergonomic is to go ahead and flip it around like this. So that way you have like your line going down the center, right, going straight up where the selvage is, and then we still are getting the same angle. The point is we want our tip to be in the top left and our bottom to be in the bottom right. Now I've got that all cut, and I can place it with my other pieces for my top row. Now for these two that are going to make up our side strip piece units, those we have to cut at a different angle so that they will align correctly when we go to put our block together. So I'm going to show you that now. Now again, we need 24 of these, and that's going to be 6 of 4 fabrics. So what I did was I stacked up 3 at a time of the same fabric and cut, and that worked out really well for me. In this one, I'm just gonna stack 2 of them because we need the same angle on both, so that way we can have some efficiencies in here. This is my preferred way to do it, where I'm gonna line up my strip or my inch marking with the bottom and my point with the top. And then I'm just gonna kind of cut down and a little bit away from me there. And now you can see that we have created it going in an opposite direction of this, and that will allow our blocks to be facing the correct way when everything is said and done. Now we're going to go over a couple more cutting instructions for the background, and we'll be good to go. Now we need to cut some triangles for our top and our bottom wedge. And you will notice that this is taller than our ruler. And most of the time, this is way large enough for my purposes. It's not in this case. So I'm going to show you how to use the lines on your ruler to measure when you need to cut a piece that's a little bigger than the ruler you have. So the first thing we need to do here is square up our side and cut off our selvage. You can see our selvage is actually a tad bit crooked, so I want to make sure that's nice and even. Now this particular one tells us to create a half equilateral triangle. This is a way to save some fabric when we're putting everything together. Here's how to do it. We're going to start by moving our ruler so that the 1/4 inch mark is even with the edge that we just squared up. Then I'm going to mark with a pen that'll go away, and I'm using a friction gel pen here, in the seam allowances where that 1/4 inch is. That gives me my seam allowance. And I'm going to line up this 30-degree angle with those marks. Now you'll see if I cut here, I'm cutting way into it. So what I want to do is have where that 30-degree line is hit the edge of the fabric. So we're going to just slide that down, and this gets a little weird because I'm trying to make sure that that 30-degree stays on that 1/4 inch mark that I made. And this is an old ruler, so I can't see all the way to the edge, but I can see that I'm lining up into it. So now I can see pretty clearly that I've got my 30-degree even with those 1/4 inch. And I have the edge of my ruler even with where that's hitting the edge. So that's going to allow me to create a half equilateral triangle that has my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that is perfect. So now that I'm done, I can go ahead and slice that off. And one thing you want to pay attention to is what direction you're starting the angle for this half equilateral triangle. Because in order to have enough facing in different directions, since this isn't a solid fabric, we do need to make sure that we're starting half of them going from the top left to the bottom right, and the other half going from the bottom left to the top right. So just keep that in mind, watch your directions, you'll be fine. So now I'm going to cut an equilateral triangle out of this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to line up my 60-degree with the edge of that I just cut. And again, so that where it's coming out to the edge where that line is, it's also even with the bottom here. Then I'm able to go ahead and trim up the side. And I like to keep track of what edge is my straight edge and which edges are my bias. That way I can keep this straight edge on the outside of the quilt and it will stretch less. All right, so now we're gonna flip it. And for this one, I am lining it up again so that 60-degree is coming all the way up to the top. And it is coming out right at the tip of that. And it is following along the edge that I just cut. And I'm going to keep on rotating and cutting like this until I've made my way all the way down the strip. But again, this is now my straight edge. So I'm going to rotate that so that they're all in the same spot. That way I can make sure those are all at the edge of my quilt. All right, so now it's time to cut my diamonds. This is the one that I need all those half equilateral triangles from. So I'm going to start by doing that. Again, we're going to square that up. Mark our 1/4 inch within the seam allowance, and paying attention to which way this ruler is going. In this case, I want it going from the top left to the bottom right. I'm going to go ahead and make that cut with that 30-degree line on the 1/4 inch. So now I've got my half equilateral triangle that's going to go at the edges of my wedge 1 and 3. Now the reason why I started with the equilateral triangle is because I'm going to kind of mark that a little bit for this next bit to kind of show myself where to go. Because when we're using a ruler like this to cut it, all you have to do is flip it around and cut, but obviously it's not large enough to hit the bottom. Now I could line this up and that would give me my angle and I would just have to keep going, but I don't trust myself to be able to cut straight like that. So here's what I'm going to do instead. Now we need a 60-degree angle coming off of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler and line it up as though I was going to cut a 60-degree equilateral triangle. But instead of cutting, I'm going to make a mark within the seam allowance. Mark up here as well. All right, so now we've got our mark where we started and where we're coming out. So now I can take my ruler and giving that a 180-degree turn, I can turn it so that my 60-degree angle is now at the top and I am now even with that pink line that I made within the seam allowance, and now I'm able to cut down here to get my diamond that I need for my background. I'll do that a couple more times so that way you can see it and get it down. All right, so we've started our cut and I'm going to make a little mark down here within the seam allowance and up here within the seam allowance so I know where I'm supposed to be. I'm going to give my ruler a flip so that way I can cut all the way across. And I'm lining up the 60-degree line with the opposite straight edge. And then the point where it hits the edge of the ruler is where that turn is. And you can actually see the angle is going right on my other 60-degree line. So that's another way to check to make sure you're doing it right. Now I can cut. All right, one more time here. Make our mark down here. Make our mark up top. Line up the top edge with 60-degree. And also we have our mark here and we can see that it is going down the other 60-degree line, so I know I'm in line and I can go ahead and cut. Now that I've gotten to the edge, I need to also make another triangle here. So what I want to do is line up a 1/4 inch mark with the bottom, and then also make sure that I'm pretty much lined up at the top as well, that I've got a nice straight line going across here. And once I've got that, I can go ahead and give myself a cut. So here are both of the half equilateral triangles that I cut from the same strip. Because we had an odd number of diamonds, they're both facing the same direction. So essentially I've cut the same one. So that's why it's important to change the direction of your starting cut for half of them. And again, we have full diagrams of how to do this in the pattern called Celestial, which you can get on my website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. I promise once you get through all the cutting, it's super smooth sailing and it goes really fast. So I mentioned before that you can do this scrappy. You could have things be wherever you want, with the exception of the background. You want to keep that in the same spot. But you also can have all of them stacked. So that's what I did for mine. So what I'm doing is I'm following my layout diagram where we had kind of a green at the top, then an orange, then a pink, and then our background piece. So what we're going to do is we're always going to sew them in this order. What I did to minimize my mistakes was I stacked all 6 of this color, all 6 of this color, all 6 of this color, then all 6 of this color. That way I was making one entire set at a time and it was much less likely to make mistakes that way. Now we're going to offset these a little bit because what's going to happen is we are going to sew these together so that they end up forming kind of an offset strip piece unit. What that does by cutting off that to start with is we are able to use the entire strip length when we start cutting it into a strip row. And if we hadn't done that, then you would have lost all of this from your fabric. So not so much here, but it ends up getting more and more fabric loss as you come down, and then you would lose it on the other side over here. So we're gonna sew these together in an offset way, and it makes everything go great. You're able to make great use of the fabric this way. So I'm gonna demonstrate how to line these up with the bottom two because they have the most contrast, and I think it'll be the easiest for you guys to see at home. So what we eventually want to have happen is when we press this open after it's sewn together, that we've got a nice straight line coming down here. But that means we can't start with the straight line because we have to deal with this offset seam allowance a little bit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over right sides together, and you can see I've got my point sticking out from this bottom fabric just a little bit. Now you want that to be about 1/4 inch away from the edge. So if I line this ruler up, then that little valley in between here where these little points meet is exactly 1/4 inch away from the edge. Now you can mark this if you want. We can take our marking tool and we can mark a line right here, and that will help ensure that you have a way to line that up better, because you know that that little mark should be right where your stitch is and right where it should be meeting the piece that's underneath. But then you're just going to stitch your seam allowance all the way down, and you'll notice that they don't end at the same spot. That's supposed to be that way. It's going to be offset all the way down. But the biggest thing is you do not want to start it where that's nice and even, because then when we flip this up later, you can see how offset that's going to be. It's not going to be a straight line. Whereas if we line it up where it's 1/4 inch away, once we ultimately move this up, you can see that is in fact straight. So that's what we're going for. Have that be a little offset when you start. All right, so I'm starting to sew that 1/4 inch seam allowance. I strip piece this exactly the way I normally would strip piece anything. The only difference is the way you started off with that little offset. All right, so you can see that it doesn't end at the same spot. That's okay, that's supposed to happen. And I'm going to go ahead and push the next one through again, making that a little offset at the beginning. Now I press almost all of my seams open, but especially when I'm doing anything with diamond points like this, the seams just come together so much flatter and your points are so much pointier when you do it this way. So what you want to do is start by opening up that seam and kind of finger pressing it a little bit. Then you're going to take the tip of your iron and you're just going to keep that going straight down the seam. And then I keep my fingers down, 3 or 4 of them, just pressing open that seam as I'm working my way down it. And that way I can sort of pre-press it open, and it makes it a lot easier to make your way down the strip. Now, remember we have that little bit of offset. I do kind of press that along that seam just because it makes it a little easier. It lies a little flatter when we're cutting our strip sets later. Now I'm going to do one more thing here, and I'm going to flip everything so that the right side is now up, and I'm just going to go down that seam one more time to get it good and flat. We're going to do the same thing with the other strip piece unit. All right, so now we've got everything into sets of 2. Again, we're going to flip that right sides together, and we're going to start with that little offset. Feel free to mark it if you need to, and we're going to stitch down. And remember, we're not going to be even on these ends, and we're not supposed to be, so that's okay if it isn't. All right, I'm going to press this one open again. The one difference is sometimes I'll angle my iron a little bit, so that way I'm going nice and flat over one of these seams as well. And that just helps me keep everything flat as opposed to accidentally flipping a seam going in a direction I don't want it to go to. One other change is when I flip it to the right side, I'm going to take my spray mister and I'm just going to go over the entire piece. I don't like to use steam in my iron because I feel like it distorts the fabric, and also every iron I've ever put water into eventually spits nastiness out. So I use these spray misters instead because I'm able to just get a gentle mist over the seam, and then I'm able to go over it and get everything nice and flat, which will be really, really nice or when we're cutting everything apart. Now, if something is going to go wrong, this is where it's most likely to happen. We want to make sure that we're cutting this strip set to the right width so that everything fits together properly. So make sure you're referring to your pattern, Celestial, which you can get at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, so that you're cutting it to the right width. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to line any 60-degree line up on the seam allowance. That makes sure that I'm going to get a nice straight strip set. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to overcut on this first one, because even though this is pretty straight, like that came together really, really well, it isn't always. So I just want to make sure I've got a little bit of wiggle room on that first one. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a trim. We'll move this one out of the way. Now I'm going to flip that around 180 degrees. And this time I'm going to square it up. So, and this is what you do for the first cut only. So for this one, I've got my 60 degree on my seam allowance again. And now I'm measuring the measurement that I'm supposed to cut it to for the width. It's even with that edge that I had just trimmed up. So now I can go ahead and square that up. And we say squaring it up, but we're making diamonds. It is what it is. Now at this point, this should not look like a perfect diamond. This is going to look like it is going longer this way than it is up and down, because when you think about it, you already have your 1/4 inch seam allowances in here. So once we add in our 1/4 inch seam allowances here, then it's going to be the right size. But make sure you're taking your measurement for the width from the pattern instead of measuring the distance from here to here, because then you're going to end up with the wrong size. So for all the rest of the strips, you're just going to line up that 60-degree line with your seam allowance. That makes sure that all your angles are right going up and down. Then you're going to put your width measurement even with the side, and as long as both those are where they should be, then you're good to go ahead and trim. You're going to repeat all those steps that we just did to also create your top row, making sure that you're paying attention to the placement of your fabrics if you want everything to be in the same spot. If you don't care, it doesn't matter. Just make sure you've got the right angle going with the right angle. You'll be fine. I'm also going to repeat all those steps with the 2 that we need for our sides. The only difference is our angle is going to start at a different direction. All right, so we've got all of our strip piece units ready to go, and we can start to see what's looking like our diamond block. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create essentially one large row in the center. So I'm going to take these 2 away so that it's a little less confusing. So when we put diamond blocks together, they're going to kind of be going in opposite directions. I'm just going to move this for now. So when we flip this together, you can see that they're kind of pointing the opposite way. And we still want to have that overlap by about 1/4 inch. Now, if this is new for you, then you can absolutely do the marking steps that I'm about to show you. But once you get the hang of it, you can just eyeball it and everything will be fine. So I'm taking my ruler and I'm lining up the 1/4 inch lines with the edge that's going to be pinned together. And I'm just taking my marking tool, and this is important. You want to make sure that pen is leaned in so that it's in contact with the ruler when you're doing that. So that way you're exactly 1/4 inch away. Now, if you want to pin, this is how you want to do it. You want to get everything lined up so that way when your edges are even on the top, that your point, that hash mark that you made, is coming out nice and even along with where this little, I call it a valley is. So now I'm going to take, and I'm just going to pin that because we got that good to go. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You can just line that up so that way that little mark is even with the edge right there. And we're going to put a little pin in like that. Now, if you want to also pin in the center, you can. Now, here's a beautiful thing about sewing on a bias is that you can give it a little bit of tension as you are sewing. So that way, if these aren't fitting together perfectly, what you do is you just kind of, you know, not tug it, but just straighten it out, and you'll be able to make that work really easily. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a sew. And actually, honestly, I'm going to do this one at the same time. So when I'm sewing, I just flip them over like this and feed them through the machine. And I'm good to go. But I recommend, you don't need to press in between. So I recommend you sew one side and then sew the other side on this. Then go ahead and press everything all at the same time. But if that confuses you, just do one side at a time and you'll be good to go. Now I'm going to press these seams open. Just like when we were doing the strip piecing, you want to start by opening the seam and finger pressing it down. Then you're going to put the tip of the iron down, and in this case, the seam is going in the same direction as my iron, so it's really easy to just go right over the top of it without worrying about accidentally flipping something going the wrong direction. In this case, though, I'm going to hit that seam first. So what I want to do is lift and press. That way the angles of my iron don't hit that wrong and accidentally flip that seam going the wrong way. Once I'm done, I'm going to flip that to the right side and go over those seams one more time. Now it's time to add our top and bottom rows, and this is going to require a little bit more marking and more pinning than you might be used to. You know that I really don't love pinning. I really haven't pinned up until this point. I didn't pin for any of the strip piecing. I showed you how to pin for this, but I don't actually pin when I'm sewing it together, and that's because I've done probably thousands of these. I definitely did when I got started. But for this part, in order to make sure that these points come together exactly so, it's really important that you not only take the time to mark, but also to pin. All right, so I'm going to start just by flipping this over, and I'm going to mark 1/4 inches away from both of these seams because they each need to connect 2 seams up and down here. This is a great task to do while you're sitting and watching TV one night. That's usually how I do all of mine. And I could see this here at home. I kind of went over it a few more times so you could hopefully see it there. But what matters is that you can see it, and if pink isn't doing it for you, get a different one that you can see. And do the same thing for the bottom. All right, so now I'm going to flip this back over. And we marked here and here at the top and the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this one too, knowing that I don't have to mark this middle seam, but I do have to mark these because these are going to come in contact there. Go ahead and flip that back over. And we're going to do the same thing with the seams that are going to connect on that bottom row. Now it's time to pin this together, and I use a 2-pinning method whenever I have anything going on with diamonds or triangles. Here's why. So I'm going to flip these guys right sides together, and I'm going to start by finding where that mark crosses where my seam allowance is, and I'm going to put my pin straight through it. Now from this side, I'm eyeballing about 1/4 inch away from where the seam is. And I'm going to poke that through, and then I'm going to double check that it's on my mark on the back as well, and it is, so we're good to go there. So now what I'm doing is I'm pinching that pin in between my thumb and forefinger so it's going through perpendicularly through the fabric. Now with the second one, this one I'm going to go parallel to the fabric and go right across that seam. The reason why I use a second pin rather than rocking this one is because if I were to rock it and pin it, then my top fabric would push forward, my bottom fabric would push back, and where those seams meet is no longer right on top of each other. So remember, we do not have a matching seam here because we have that large triangle, but we do have to repeat the process over on this seam. Let's check the back. I'm a little high on this one, so I'm going to readjust. All right, that's looking good. It's right where that seam is and where the mark is. Again, we're going to hold that perpendicularly, and we're going to pin. And as long as I've got the pins out, I'm gonna also do the same thing with my bottom seam. And look and see, everything's going in the opposite direction. That's how it's supposed to be, because then when we flip it, everything's gonna be going back the right way again. Now, if you wanted to pin at the center to just kind of control it a little more, you certainly could. I typically do not for one this size. One other thing I want to point out to you is we still have our little valleys that have been created here. Again, those should always be about 1/4 inch away from the edge that we're sewing on, and then everything's going to line up perfectly when we press it open. All right, now I'm just sewing that 1/4 inch seam like normal. Now, here's what is important. I'm sewing right up to where that pin is because I do not want to have taken all the time to pin that and then have it get moved on me. So I want to make sure that I'm sewing as close to that pin but not sewing over it as I can. All right, we are going to press these seams open as well. Since we have a lot of different seams here and they're all going in different directions, I'm doing a lot of lifting and pressing so that I don't accidentally push something going in a direction I don't want it to go in. And we're going to do that for both of the seams. Now the last thing I'm going to do is give the entire block a spritz with my spray mister and give it one final press to get it nice and flat. All right, so this is the block. It looks absolutely fantastic. Let's zoom in because those points were absolutely fabulous. I mean, look at this. This is just absolutely fantastic. Everything came together absolutely beautifully. It's because we took that time to pin and then we sewed as close to that pin as we possibly could. And we also marked it to make sure we were pinning in the right spot. Now from here, your quilt is going to get sewn into wedges. And then your wedges are going to get sewn into a half, and then the halves are going to be joined. We have a bunch of diagrams on how that works in our layout diagram, but to give you some tips and tricks. So when you have everything laid out, you're going to want to take and make your marks on the wrong sides of the blocks that you're sewing together, and then your blocks too are going to be going in opposite directions before they get sewn together, and then it will all be going in one straight way once everything is good to go. One other thing you want to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that you are really paying attention to where your background point is and where your darkest point is if you are following everything. That'll help you make sure that everything stays nice and tidy as you're going, but it really isn't super hard from this point out. It just is a little weird. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're working on it. But as you're assembling your rows and then also sewing your rows together, just make sure you're marking anywhere where a seam is joining. Once you're assembling your wedges, at that point, your seams are going in the same direction and you don't have to mark anymore there. You can just line your seams up on top of each other and you'll be good to go. Thanks so much for following along with this month's Stashin' with Stephanie pattern, Celestial. I hope you guys really enjoy it. I hope you guys stretch your wings a little bit and give it a go. And that strip piecing really does make it a lot easier because it's going to go a lot faster for you. And again, if you've been inspired by this and you want to join our subscription club, Stashin' with Stephanie, you are not going to get this fabric in the mail. Your first bundle is going to come around the 25th of May. So if you need this fabric in your life, make sure you join. And then on your second purchase, go purchase a quilt kit while supplies last. Everything else, the pattern, you can get on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Until next time, happy quilting.